The UFC is worth $12 billion as of 2024, which is pretty significant knowing that Dana White and the Fertitta brothers bought it for $2 million in 2001. That's a 600,000% increase, which is a major milestone that a lot of MMA organizations never get to see. We've heard so many stories of MMA promotions getting discontinued, like Pride, Strikeforce, IFL, Bellator, which was then purchased by PFL. The list goes on. So Dana White may be hated by a lot of people, but one thing you can't take away from the man is that he knows how to run his empire. Before you continue watching this video, I ask that you like and subscribe unless you're watching this on February 29th. Thanks. There's a lot of controversy surrounding fighter pay, and everyone thinks it's up to Dana White to add more zeros to everyone's paycheck. But Dana doesn't own the whole UFC. He's among various other co-owners like TKO Group Holdings, Endeavor, and Silver Lake Partners, just to name a few. Dana White only owns 9%. He may be the president of the UFC, but he doesn't have the final say in every decision made by the company, and even if he does, we have to tread very softly before we make accusations. Every story has two sides, even if one of those sides is a bald, potentially tyrannical looking man. It's no secret that most fighters in the UFC aren't really paid that much. The lowest you can get is $10,000 a show and another $10,000 to win. This is what most fighters fighting on the Dana White Contender Series get. The average annual salary of an American is around $66,000 according to 3 separate articles. This may not be the actual value, but shouldn't be too far from it. So in theory, if you fight 3 times a year and win every single one of your fights, you wouldn't make anything less than $60,000. Keep in mind that your paycheck increases the more you win fights, and if you're lucky, you could get a performance bonus. This may look very good, but keep in mind that UFC fighters have more expenses than the average American. They have to worry about training camps, supplements, gym memberships, plane tickets for themselves and their corner, and depending on how serious you're taking your career, this may get very pricey. And the most sucky thing about being a UFC fighter is that they're signed as independent contractors and not employees, which means the UFC can get away with not giving them employee benefits. These employee benefits include health insurance, workers' compensation, and retirement benefits. Which is pretty ironic because you'll get health insurance for a job that isn't that risky, whereas for UFC fighters who actually need it because they get injured after every single fight, at times they get injured before they even fight in the training camps, so you'd think the UFC would be generous enough to give them health insurance, but clearly that's not the case. I honestly don't know how the UFC can justify this, especially knowing that they're racking up so much money. They signed an apparel deal with Venom and Reebok. The highest a fighter can get paid for that sponsorship is $42,000 per bout. That is if you're champion. The lowest you can get is $4,000 for entry-level fighters. So let's say they fight 3 times a year. That'll bump their salary up by $12,000, which is not that significant, but definitely good. Growing up, I always used to wonder where the UFC gets most of its money, and I used to think it was tickets for a good reason. Take UFC 306 for instance. It's the highest grossing UFC event of all time with a gate of $22 million and a sold out arena of 6,024. Which is pretty good, but think of how much money it costed to host the event. I have no doubt in my mind they made profit because they did sell out the arena, but at the same time, you can only experience that event in person once, whereas broadcasting is everlasting. In South Africa, we have a TV network called DStv, and UFC plays every weekend with ads that are specifically for South Africans. Imagine how much money the UFC makes every time it's broadcasted. Keep in mind that DStv is in a lot of other countries. On top of that, the UFC makes money from UFC Fight Pass subscriptions as well as ESPN Plus and pay-per-view buys. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez cost $30, so if 300,000 people bought it, it would make $9 million. And there are at least 3 pay-per-view events in 1 year, so I don't think the UFC should be depriving their fighters of things like health insurance, retirement plans, etc. In as much as UFC fighters struggle, I don't see how their struggle is significantly worse than spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree that you won't even use, and when you eventually try to use it, you can't get a job because the field you're trying to enter is oversaturated. If anything, I would say the latter is way worse, because if I trained to be an MMA fighter for 3 years, I would need about $150 for a monthly subscription. By the end of that 3 years, I would have spent $5,400. The worst that could happen to me is I suffered CTE among other injuries in training, which could be avoided if I have the proper regimen. And you know what the difference is between MMA and education? You don't have to do MMA, so most MMA fighters are there out of preference and not circumstances. I don't know about you, but I'd rather make a little bit of money doing what I love than to get millions of dollars sitting behind a desk doing administrative tasks that I have no desire to be doing. I do hope MMA grows even more than what it is today, so we can see these warriors get at least one more zero on their paycheck as well as employee benefits. But for the time being, we'll just have to suffer with this reality. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.